Behavioral interviews are some of the more popular types of questions to ask during an interview. They're also incredibly challenging to answer correctly. And if you're interviewing with Samsung, they're absolutely going to ask you some of these questions. So in today's video, from a recruiter's perspective, I'm going to give you 4 of the questions that Samsung actually asks during their interview process, and I'm going to teach you how to answer them. Let's go. What is a behavioral interview question? It's basically a question that requires you to look at something that happened in the past and talk the interviewer through how you handled it. They do this because past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. Now, you can tell when it's a behavioral interview question because they'll say something along the lines of, can you give me an example of a time when? Or tell me about a time when. Now, when you get a behavioral interview question, there is a strategy that you should use to deal with them, and it is called the STAR method. And this basically serves as a framework on how to answer any of these questions. Situation, task, action, result. So, what was the situation you were in? What was the task you were responsible for handling? What was the specific action you took? And then what was the result? What was the outcome of everything you did? And when it makes sense, throw an L on the end for lesson. Now, let's get into the actual questions. The first question is, tell me about a time when you had to make a decision that you knew would not be popular, but it was the right thing to do. This is a really challenging question, but it's a question that you might get asked if you're a manager or a supervisor or somebody in project management, somebody who had to make a decision that would impact other people. There's a few things you need to do to answer this question correctly. First, you want to use the STAR technique: situation, task, action, result. Walk them through what the situation was, the decision you had to make, why it would be unpopular, what your rationale was for deciding this was the correct course of action, and then ultimately the outcome. These are the things you kind of need to cover, and you need to do this in a way in which you're not skipping any of the steps. If you don't explain why it was unpopular, you're going to be missing out on what they're actually looking for in this interview question. It's also really important as you're walking through here to explain your thought process, why you thought it needed to be happen, and how you communicated it to other people. If you're in the position to make a decision that is unpopular, you're probably also in the position of communicating why that was done. So make sure when you're walking them through everything, you're also talking about how you communicated this to people, how you handled their objections, how you explain things through to them, and make sure it's consistent with how you are as a person, how you're interviewing, and the way you're trying to portray yourself as a leader. Now, the next question is, can you tell me about a time when you received unpleasant feedback? Now, this unpleasant feedback could come from a variety of places. It could come from a manager, could come from a customer, could come in a review. It could come from all kinds of different places. It's really important to pick something that's authentic to you. But additionally, I always tell people, when you have to remember something that was unpleasant or share something that was unpleasant or as time you made a mistake, you want to use the 50% rule. The 50% rule means you should use an example from the first 50% of your career. Why? Well, you can be authentic while also putting distance from yourself, right? This wasn't a mistake you made last week. They don't have to worry about you making errors right now. But if you have a 10-year career, if you make it something that happened to you in year 4, you can also showcase that you've learned a ton since then, and it's a mistake that while you did make it in the past, you wouldn't make it now. A few other things that are really important when you answer this, you want to use the STAR technique, but whenever it is that you're telling the feedback that you got, it's important that you let them know that you accepted this fully. You heard the person out, you accepted the feedback, and then you made a change and you improved on the area you received negative feedback in. People are going to make mistakes. All of us have made mistakes in our career. All of us could do things better, but when you are brought to your attention, when it's brought to your attention that you need to change something, it's important that you make a behavioral modification, and moving forward, you don't make the same mistakes. So make sure you share with them that you accepted the feedback, you were grateful they provided you that opportunity to better yourself, and you implemented systems and changes that allowed you to be a better version of yourself moving forward. Now, make that sound authentic to you, use your own words, but those are the things you need to convey while answering this interview question. The next question is, can you tell me about a time you had a different perspective than a manager or executive? This is a really challenging one to navigate for some people because you have to accomplish a lot of things. First and foremost, you need to talk about a time where you and your manager had a differing of opinion. Maybe they told you to do something and you determined, wow, that's really not the best way to go about this. That can be challenging to walk through, but it's really important that you do a few things when you answer this question. One, clearly define the situation for them so they understand where the disagreement took place. Now, ideally, In this example that you're sharing, you have access to information that maybe your manager didn't. So this allows you to go to them and say, hey, I know you wanted me to do this. However, I'm not sure if you're aware of blank. Because of this, I think it would be a better opportunity to do blank. Now, this example isn't a good example if you don't go back to them with a different course of action. It's not enough to disagree with them. You also need to go to that situation with a plan. So when you're answering this interview question, make sure you're talking about the plan that you have. When you're telling the story, it's also important to make sure that you're going to them respectfully. You're sharing your case as to why you think things should be handled differently. If you have data, you want to make sure you share this, and then you need to share the outcome with them. What happened? Did they do what you were doing? Ideally, your manager did make the change that you're requesting, and then you need to share the outcome. How did it go? Ideally, it went well. A really important note here. When you're going through this and you're answering this interview question, you cannot talk poorly about your manager. Even something that you might think is innocent, like, they didn't always make the best decisions when it came to this. You don't want to say that. It is never to your benefit to talk negatively about your manager, your teammates, or your company you've worked for in the past. That is just going to make you look like a bad candidate, so don't do that. So make sure when you're sharing the disagreement, you're not talking ill of your supervisor. The next question is, can you give me an example of a time you went above and beyond in your job? Now, it's really important to accomplish a few things here. Use the STAR technique, as per all these questions. But the mistake most people make is they don't give you something that's actually above and beyond. They just share something that's their job. And if you just give them an example of something that they would expect you would do in that job, it's not succeeding in this interview question. Above and beyond means it's something that falls outside of the scope of your role. Maybe you could be helping someone from a different department, or staying late to help a different department with doing something, or work with one of your colleagues to finish a project that was their responsibility and you weren't attached to it, but you knew it needed to get done. So whatever that authentic story is, make sure you share that. A really important factor to remember here is that you want to come off as you were someone who was happy to help. You were willing to do it. And you did it not because you felt obligated, because you love being a good teammate and you want to help your organization. So speaking positively of it, speaking enthusiastically, that's really going to drive home the point that this isn't just an example. This is who you are. Because if they're asking this question, it obviously means they're interested in hiring people who would do things like this. You need them to walk away knowing, they are this type of person, and I can tell from the way they talked about the example they gave. One of the most important questions you will ever get asked in a job interview is, why do you want to work here? They're going to ask you, why do you want to work at Samsung? And you have to have an amazing answer. It might be the most important question you get asked, which is why I made this video right here. This video here is going to give you 4 different examples of how you can answer this question in an incredibly compelling way so you can stand out as an amazing candidate and get the job. So I am done here, but I will see you over there.